Apple generated more than $200 billion from the iPhone in fiscal 2025. But one of the most valuable things Apple owns isn't another iPhone waiting to be sold. It's the relationship with the customer who already has one. By early 2026, Apple had more than 2.5 billion active devices in use around the world, and every one of those devices can become something far more valuable than a completed hardware sale. An account, a payment method, a cloud subscription, an app customer, another device, and eventually another upgrade. That changes how you should think about Apple's business. The iPhone doesn't just generate revenue when you buy it, it brings you inside a system Apple can keep monetizing for years. Apple is still, unmistakably, a hardware giant. In fiscal 2025, iPhone alone generated about $209.6 billion. Mac added another $33.7 billion. iPad, $28 billion. Wearables, home products, and accessories, another $35.7 billion. These are enormous businesses on their own, but hardware does something else that never shows up on the product box. It expands the installed base. Sell someone an iPhone, and Apple hasn't just moved one unit. It's added another active device to its ecosystem. Then that customer might buy AirPods, an Apple Watch, a Mac, an iPad. One customer can quietly become several active Apple devices at once. By mid-2026, Apple said its installed base had reached another all-time high across every major product category and geographic segment. Because once the hardware is in your hands, the economics start to change. Most companies celebrate when the product leaves the store. For Apple, that may be exactly when the second business begins. Look at the margins. In fiscal 2025, Apple's products business ran a gross margin of around 37%. Services? More than 75%. And in the first half of fiscal 2026, services gross margin reached about 76.6%. That gap is enormous, and it comes from a structural difference. A physical device has to be designed, manufactured, assembled, shipped, stored, distributed, and eventually replaced. Services behave very differently. The App Store, iCloud, Apple Music, Apple TV, advertising, AppleCare, payments. Not all of these businesses work identically, but together they allow Apple to generate high-margin revenue from an installed base that already exists. In fiscal 2025, services generated about $109 billion, and it was still growing. So every additional device doesn't just increase Apple's chance to sell more hardware, it increases the surface area Apple can distribute services across. This is where the model gets genuinely interesting. Imagine launching a subscription business from scratch. You need to find customers, advertise to them, convince them to download your app, create an account, add a payment method, and earn enough trust for them to subscribe. Apple already sits far closer to the customer than that. The device is already in their hand, the operating system is already running, their account is already connected, their payment information may already be stored, and Apple's own services are already woven into the experience. In 2025, the App Store averaged more than 850 million users every week across 175 countries and regions. That isn't simply an app marketplace, it's distribution at a scale almost no company on Earth can match. A normal company asks, how do we reach the customer? Apple increasingly gets to ask, what else can we offer the customer who's already here? At Apple's scale, that distribution advantage is enormously valuable. Now follow one customer. They buy an iPhone. Apple books the hardware sale. Then maybe they need more iCloud storage. They buy AirPods, later an Apple Watch. They pay for an app. Maybe Apple Music, maybe AppleCare. Eventually, the iPhone gets old, and they replace it with another iPhone. No single customer needs to buy everything. That's not the point. The point is the relationship keeps going. Once you see Apple this way, the objective changes. It isn't sell as many iPhones as possible this quarter. It's increase the lifetime value of the installed base. Hardware acquires the customer. The ecosystem deepens the relationship. Services monetize parts of it. Future hardware renews it. That's why 2.5 billion active devices matter so much. They aren't 2.5 billion identical customers. They aren't even 2.5 billion individual people. They're something more precise. 2.5 billion active points of connection into Apple's ecosystem. And those connections accumulate. Your photos live in iCloud. Your passwords sync across devices. Your watch talks to your phone. Your AirPods switch between devices automatically. Your purchases sit in one account. Your messages appear on your Mac. Your backups restore straight onto your next phone. No single feature makes leaving impossible. That's the important part. Apple doesn't need to trap you. It just needs staying to be more convenient than leaving. Imagine one thin thread connecting you to a company. Easy to cut. Now add 10 more. Each one small. Together, they become a switching cost. That's one of Apple's most powerful advantages. Every additional product makes the existing ones slightly more useful, which makes the next purchase easier to justify. The system deepens the relationship without ever needing to restart it from zero. But the same system that creates convenience also creates market power, which is exactly why regulators keep circling the points where Apple controls distribution. The App Store, payments, default services, developer access, the rules governing what can happen on iOS. Under the European Union's Digital Markets Act, regulators have pushed Apple to open more of that system to alternative app distribution and payment options. In July 2026, Apple lost its legal challenge against parts of the EU's gatekeeper framework. The General Court upheld its designation as a gatekeeper for both the App Store and iOS. The following month, Apple changed its EU fee structure again, replacing parts of its alternative distribution fee model with a simplified commission structure. Apple argues tighter control protects security, privacy, and the quality of the user experience. Regulators argue the same control can restrict competition. That debate is genuinely complicated, but strategically, one thing is clear. Regulators aren't attacking some random corner of Apple's business. They're focused precisely on the control points that make the installed base such powerful distribution. That tells you where the economic value actually sits. Then there's AI. The obvious question is whether Apple can build the best model. But for the business, there may be a more important question. Who owns the interface between you and whatever you want to do next? For years, Apple has controlled much of that interface through the device and operating system itself. Open the phone, use an app, search, message, pay, buy. But increasingly capable AI assistants could slide in as another layer between the user and those actions. Apple clearly understands the stakes. At WWDC 2026, it unveiled a significantly more capable Siri integrated across its devices and apps. And in China, Apple has been adapting its AI strategy around local models, partners, and regulation. The real objective isn't shipping an AI feature. It's preserving Apple's position between the customer and the digital world around them. But an installed base this enormous carries its own risk. Apple needs new people entering the ecosystem. Existing customers need reasons to stay. Developers need reasons to keep building for the platform. And regulators can weaken some of the distribution advantages built around that base. There's also a deeper tension underneath all of it. When billions of active devices already depend on a system that works, radical change gets harder. Disrupt the experience too aggressively. And you risk damaging the very economics you're trying to protect. So Apple's greatest asset can quietly become a constraint. The larger the installed base gets, the more valuable continuity becomes, and the harder it becomes to move fast. Apple's greatest product may still look like an iPhone, but financially, something just as important happens after that iPhone leaves the store. It joins the installed base. One device becomes an account becomes services. Services create recurring and transaction-driven economics. Convenience encourages another device, and eventually, another upgrade. That's why Apple's advantage was never simply convincing you to buy its next product. It's making the product you already bought part of the reason you buy the next one. And that leads to a lesson far bigger than Apple. Companies spend enormous sums trying to acquire the next customer, but sometimes the most valuable customer isn't the one you're about to acquire. It's the one already inside your system. Apple now has more than 2.5 billion active devices inside that system, and the real machine was never any single one of them. It's what happens when billions of devices become part of the same economic ecosystem.